just that awkward couple minutes while they wait.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Matt Braden here from the GPAR professional staff. Hope everybody's having a good start to their Friday morning. As we wrap up this week, we're doing it kind of in reverse. Coffee.
And corrects himself because he realizes
if you guys could keep yourself on mute, that would be dynamite. So we're ending the week with coffee talk as opposed to kicking off the week. So we're really glad to have all of you here with us today. Before we get into today's presentation, just a couple of things I want to hit on. Our next workshop will be on Thursday, December 10th, and that's going to start at 10 o'clock. And it is how to make your buyer's offer stronger in a seller's market. That's going to be presented by Janice Benstock. Janice was with us yesterday doing another workshop. So we had a nice turnout for that, and hopefully we'll have another good turnout for next week. So keep an eye on your inbox for messages from GPAR about login information and all that stuff. As you may have also have seen in your inbox, messages from us about our virtual 5K. And we would love to have you guys get one of these super cool t-shirts. We've partnered up with the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors in celebration of their centennial. Yes, that's 100 years of being a state association. They partnered up with us to help out Phil Abundance. During this pandemic, food insecurity is probably at its highest point, certainly in all of our lifetimes. So what we're trying to do is raise a little bit of money to help out Phil Abundance. I don't know if anyone saw the news this past week. They were victims of a phishing scheme earlier in the summer and was published in the Inquirer just the other day about how they lost almost $1 million. So it's just amplifying the need to help out that organization, and we're proud to partner up with them. $20 registration fee, you get this t-shirt. We're asking you guys to raise some money. It goes to Phil Abundance. It's a cool t-shirt. Actually, the fabric feels really good too. So not only do you look good, you feel good. And we would love to see all of you guys in one of those. So please keep an eye on your inbox or go back to one of your old messages. It's really simple to register, and we would love to have you guys participate. 5K. All you need to do is move your body 5 kilometers over the course of the week. That could be running, crawling, paddling, canoeing, dancing, or I'll let you in a little secret. You don't have to move 5K at all. You can fake it as long as you raise some money. We're all good with it. So anyway, we'd love to see you guys contribute and be a part of that.
What does this economy need? Specifically in terms.
All right, I'm going to make one more request, guys. You need to keep you on mute except for one of the presenters and when they're talking. It's hard to believe we are how many years into this pandemic and we still have problems with mute. I mean, months. Anyway, with that, I turn it over to our esteemed president, Stephanie Biello. Good morning, Stephanie.
Good morning, Matt. Thank you for that. And good morning, Hank.
Morning.
Who is our guest speaker for Coffee Talk here. So Hank, there's 2 things I want to touch on this morning, which is the new changes to the Code of Ethics, and also some of the changes or new restrictions that the governor has implemented and how it affects real estate. But before we do that, I do want to reintroduce you to our group or introduce you to some of our members. Some of them know you well, and others, this is a first-time conversation. So why don't we talk a little bit about your path to PAR, which I think I heard you had some time running a restaurant?
Yeah, so I've had a couple of different lives before, and including PAR. So I was I was born in a small town, hard scrabble life. No, that's not quite true. So I was actually born here in Harrisburg, born and raised in Harrisburg. I like to sort of point out different connections to different parts of the state. So I actually did a program for Pittsburgh on Wednesday, and made sure to point out to them that I went to college at the University of Pittsburgh. I went to law school in William and Mary in Virginia, which has nothing to do with you guys. But I've got actually a trove of Philadelphia connections. My grandparent on my mother's side Her family, her parents, her grandfather actually immigrated to Philadelphia. My grandmother worked for Wanamaker's. She was a buyer for Wanamaker's. My mother, I I got her address last night from when she lived on West Gerard Avenue, and I was going to do a joke about, like asking if somebody could go pick up the teddy bear that she left there, but I've discovered it's a vacant lot, so that's not going to work. And as it happens, actually, I've got a bunch of family in South Jersey, including a cousin who runs a produce business. So some of you on the phone have probably eaten his tomatoes. Lots of connections to the southeastern part of the state there. You are correct. I did run a restaurant. That was my first thing I did actually after law school. So I guess doubling down on the Philadelphia connections, I was a counter service deli where you sort of like paid for the corned beef and got insulted for free. So, you guys probably have a feel for how that goes as well. It seems, I'm not going to try to explain the whole, how did I go from law school to restaurant? It was mostly my midlife crisis, but in my mid 20s. But there's actually a ton of similarities between what you guys do as realtors and what I was doing in the real estate business. Two of them, I think, that are really top of mind. Number one, they're both intensely personal, right? Like you guys are helping a family buy the house that they're going to live in, that they're going to raise their kids in, that they're going to put roots down in a community. I was feeding people. I was literally keeping them alive. My work product went into their mouth and into their bodies. So there's really that similar type of intense personality in both. The other similarity, which I find really comes up even more and more the more I know about your business, is that both in the restaurant business and in real estate, you spend so much time working on details behind the scenes to make everything look easy that everybody thinks they know how to do your job, right? So you guys spend every day, especially after HGTV and all that, with people telling you how to sell real estate because they think they can watch a TV show. Very similar to restaurant work, where everybody thinks they know how to make a sandwich, therefore they know how to run a successful business and tell you what you should be charging and how you should be running the business. So I actually do see a lot of stuff that carries over from those days that makes a lot of sense here in my work at PAR. I've actually been at PAR for, let's see, it would be 20 years and 19 days, but who's counting? So just past my 20-year anniversary. I took this job so I was at the restaurant. I worked for the teachers union for a couple of years after that, and then took this job basically because I needed a job. I had no real estate background whatsoever. Ironically enough, I started as PAR's director of standard forms. The classes in law school I probably hated the most were contracts and property. So there you go. And I did say at the time, jokingly, I'm just taking it because it's a job, but I'm certainly not going to retire as PAR's director of standard forms. So I'm happy to say I've lasted for 20 years. I've had about 5 different jobs since I've been here. I may end up yet retiring from PAR at some point in the future, but at least it will not be, in the same job I started in 20 years ago.
That's amazing. That's great. So let's talk about your position now and your team and how it fits into PAR to serve our members.
Yeah, so my title right now is Director of Law and Policy. Those of you who keep up with PAR's internal business may know that starting next year, I'm going to be PAR's General Counsel as Jim Goldsmith starts to kind of step back a little bit from some of his day-to-day responsibilities. He is not retiring. I want to make that absolutely clear. Please, for God's sake, don't anybody say that I said that. For all of you out there who used to be a salesperson and associate broker and decided it would be a good idea to move up to broker and now are banging your head against the wall, give me a call in a couple of months because I'll probably be doing the same thing. We are the legal department or law and policy department. We have 5 people, 4 attorneys, plus our professional standards coordinator. And I say with both utter egotism and complete truth, we really are the nerve center of the association. Other departments will get mad at me for saying that. But we publish and educate on standard forms, which is one of the top, historically, one of the top rated benefits that our members identify. We run a professional standards program for 30 of our local associations. The professional standards adherence to the code of ethics is one of the things that makes a realtor a realtor. And of course, we have the legal hotline. So every year we talk to thousands upon thousands of members, a number of which I've already seen pop on here today. to help them with their day-to-day business and issues that they come across. So one of the things I actually tell people when we hire them into the department is that we, of all the staff, we are the fastest way to actually learn what realtors do for a living every day, because we deal with the forms, we deal with the ethics, we deal with the legal questions. I'm still learning. 20 years in, I still have to look stuff up, or I might contact an agent that I know and say, there's this thing somebody explained to me, I don't get it. Can you tell me why you're doing it? But this is really sort of the core area of PAR, in my opinion, that really helps the members with their actual day-to-day business.
I agree. I think the hotline is a wonderful, wonderful tool. Helps all of us, even the brokers too. As a broker manager, I really do appreciate, and they're great. You guys are great over there. So let's talk about the pandemic and how your team has been working through this. Specifically, I guess it kind of ties in with the code of ethics, you know, the Facebook stuff, all of that kind of got heated during the pandemic. So what happens with the mechanics of all of that, of all, you know, since February of 2020?
Yeah, so one of the really cool things about working at PAR in these times is that we were, I'll say accidentally, ahead of the curve. So not that we were doing these things accidentally, but we obviously had no idea there was going to be a pandemic and a business shutdown and all that stuff coming. We all already worked on laptops. We had a voice over IP system, which had buggy remote access, but had remote access. We had a system of staffing where people are pretty decentralized. Like we have a management staff, but pretty much everybody does their job. They're well-trained, they're cross-trained, they can cover for each other. So when we started shutting down the office and things like that, we could move really quickly to just transition everything from the office environment to the home environment. Kevin Giuliano, our tech guru, actually was like a week away from already signing a Zoom contract before this whole thing happened. So we were first in line to get upgraded to Zoom in terms of the video conferencing and actually our phone service. We now use Zoom Phone for PAR, so I can call you from anywhere, not that I get to go anywhere, and you would never know the difference. So really, PAR, excuse me, PAR moved pretty seamlessly into this virtual world. Ironically enough, my family, I'll just do a quick deep dive here. My younger daughter has a number of medical issues, including a kidney transplant, which means she takes immunosuppressant drugs. So she is the walking and talking embodiment of a pre-existing condition. So we're already used to quarantine. She gets sick when somebody looks at her cross-eyed. We had sanitizer in our house. We had masks in our house. We learned how to wash our hands, 7 different times. So, when it came to me sitting in my beautiful basement here, working on PAR business, for better or for worse, not a whole lot changed. What changed, though, is really how we interacted with the members and how a lot of the members were interacting with each other. So forgetting about the business side of things, just looking at PAR side, the members have a tendency, and this makes total sense, to pay attention to PAR when there's something that they need and then ignores the rest of the time. Well, suddenly everybody needed something, right? Like these orders were coming out left and right. It was confusing. It was dangerous. It was killing your business. You needed help right away. So where we might have been used to something in the past where we could look at it, we could read it, we could think about it, we could spend a few days working on some advice and writing it up just so. Now we were pounding stuff out. So we had some members across the state, certainly not in Philadelphia, who started asking questions like, well, what are you doing? If you close down the office and you're sitting at home, like, why are we still paying staff? What are they possibly doing for us? It is true that some of our staff were a little bit underutilized for a while there till we could kind of figure out how to use them in the best way. But I can speak for my department and several other departments and say that we had way more work for months and months at a time. So we spent considerably more time actually working on PAR business here in our house than we actually ever did in the office. So a lot of that has really been a struggle in some ways to just kind of figure out the balance, figure out how to respond to everybody as quickly as we can without completely losing any differentiation between home and life. The other thing that changed is we went from a few angry members here and there to occasionally raging mobs, if I can be honest. So we spent, we have a very active Facebook group, a pretty active Facebook group, actually two, one that's members only, one that's public, that got overwhelmed. Our hotline call volume, our PAR Solution Center call volume skyrocketed. We doubled plus our legal hotline call volume at the peak of things. So we spent a lot of time answering individual questions. We spent a ton of time building out our Facebook presence, our online presence. So the first of probably many self-referential props here, parealtors.org/coronavirus is a comprehensive place to find FAQs, links to different orders, our best practices, things like that. So really just building stuff on the fly, editing it on the fly. Everything that's there now has been edited in about the last week. So it is, it's just an ongoing series of evolutions, not the least of which is me in my beautiful basement. I got this nice background here, courtesy of a PAR past president who wanted one for his own background to do videos in his office, doing videos, doing chats like this, learning to do remote hearings. It's all been just a whirlwind of fun and learning as we move forward here. And I think a lot of this is going to stick in the future because we're finding a lot of members who have connected with PAR through these alternate means who probably are going to keep wanting to do that.
Yeah, I think you guys did a great job on the blogs, on the just listed. Kevin does a great job. Just getting the information out, and the Facebook, I mean, the Facebook it got like intense there, but you know, I think it engaged people, whether, you know, they were happy or not happy, at least they were there and we got to hear, because a lot of times being the face of the association, you want member engagement, no matter if it's good, bad, or indifferent. We just need to know. And if we don't know, we can't resolve it. So
Yeah,
I think you guys did a great job.
Yeah, and I will just give a quick pointer or two. We love passion. I got no problem if anybody disagrees with anything that I say, because if I think you're wrong, I am happy to tell you that you're wrong. That's either a strength or a weakness, depending on how you look at it. My wife and kids sometimes have varying opinions on that one. But I think this is the technical legal way to say it, don't be an ass is really what it comes down to. So we had, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the code of ethics changes, so we'll get into a little bit more specific stuff later. If you post an annoying post on the Facebook group that, you know, maybe misses the point or is kind of a little bit askew or doesn't quite really, you know, catch the flavor of what we're trying to get at, we're going to leave it there. We're going to let discussion happen. Just last week, I had to shut one down though, where it devolved into name calling and, you know, you're a moron and you're an idiot. We had people at the height of this who were saying, you know, you only care about money. You're willing to kill people to go show properties. We had other people who were called all sorts of, you know, you're a liberal commie pinko, you know, bastard who shouldn't be involved in real estate. That's coming down. We are not going to stand for that. If you put it on the Facebook page, we're deleting the post, possibly the whole thread. We've had those voicemails. We've had people telling us that on the phone. We will end those conversations. So, you know, feel free to have an opinion, but you need to express yourself in a professional and an appropriate manner, because we're not going to deal with it otherwise.
Right. So along those lines, have any measures been taken as a result of the members' conduct on these Facebook posts?
So as I said, we have done a number of takedowns in various ways. We have occasionally reached out to individual members, not in an overly aggressive way, but to simply say, so for example, you know, just letting you know, the reason we took this down is because you started doing yada, 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 please stop it. We have actually, I think we can do it. I'm not the expert on Facebook. I think we can do like a muting or a temporary ban of people. So we actually have had a couple that we've had to turn off for some period of time just to kind of let everybody cool down. I will also tell you that we have seen, I mentioned we do professional standards for 30 of our local associations. Over the last couple of years, we have seen several ethics complaints based on online social media comments. So not necessarily specific even to the pandemic, coronavirus, or whatever, but people who go on Facebook and talk about the moron on the other side of this transaction. They provide enough information that it's pretty clear to identify who they're talking about. That's Article 15 of the Code of Ethics. You can't knowingly or recklessly say things that are false or misleading about other real estate professionals. So we've handled a number of ethics complaints based on people saying, this is what you posted online. I believe it is false or misleading. Now, I did have one conversation with a member who said, no, I would prove he's a moron. Like, I feel that it's not, in fact, false or misleading. I would be willing to give that proof to a hearing panel if they file a complaint. But you can be sanctioned for that. I would also point out, and in some cases, we've refused to post comments basically because the person is outing themselves as having done something wrong. So we're not going to post a comment on an article that says, that thing you're telling us to do is wrong because I've been doing it this way for years. Because if the way you're doing it is actually not compliant with the law, we're not going to let you out yourself on a PAR platform, but people are doing it. People are posting it on their own Facebook page. They're posting it on their own website. And they're actually potentially giving, like the State Real Estate Commission, a path to sanctioning them because they're admitting out loud that they're doing things wrong.
Yeah, not good, not good.
No.
Okay, so speaking of social media, NAR Board of Directors met last month and approved the changes to the Code of Ethics relating to online activity. Can you tell us about those changes and what is a violation of this code, and maybe talk about the code, the new change?
Yeah, so there were a number of changes. I will cover a couple of them at a fairly high level here, but before I do that, I'll give you an idea of some other resources. NAR has a ton of the specifics right on their website. For better or for worse, go to nar.realtors and search for the phrase hate speech. Unfortunately, a bunch of pages pop up because this is a topic that they've been dealing with here recently. So it's one of the top 3 or 4 is the actual resource page. It's a little bit long to try to say out loud. I don't know if somebody finds it while we're here, we can put it in the chat. But they've got all the resources, a very extensive FAQ, and they're doing a series of, I believe, 6 1-hour or so videos over the course of the next couple months. The first one was Monday, I believe. And they're doing them every couple of weeks for the next few months to really get into the details. So if you want to learn more about the specifics, that's the place to go. From a higher level, sort of the thumbnail sketch, there's a couple of different things that happen here. And I want to let you know from the get-go, I am one of the members from Pennsylvania who serves on the Professional Standards Committee. We have 2. I also serve on what's called the Interpretations and Procedures Advisory Board, or INTERPS. So if you hear the phrase INTERPS over the word INTERPS, that's what that reflects. That's sort of a subcommittee or a task force of the full committee that does a lot of the initial work on these proposals. So I say that not to pat myself on the back personally. I think I did enough of that earlier. But to point out that PAR is well represented. Between me and over the past about 15 years, you've had actually 2 chairs of the committee from Pennsylvania, Bill Lublin and Dominic Cardone, who have also been involved in INTERP. So Pennsylvania has a pretty good seat at that table, which is very good for the association and our members. So what was changed? What's happening is NAR has been seeing, and the states and the locals have been seeing, an influx of complaints based on just horrendous, obnoxious, offensive behavior from realtors. In some cases, it really just reflects what I would call the coarsening of society in general. People who before might have made some snide comment to their friends sitting, at the bar are now going online to say things that they probably shouldn't say in public. There's a lot of tension out there in the world today for various reasons. And people were putting out really, really, really bad stuff. By way of example, and I'll apologize in advance, these are real. There was a realtor from the Atlanta area who posted on his Facebook page. So it was like, just listed, just sold. I hate gay people, record low interest rates. According to the scriptures, gays and lesbians are murderers, just listed, come to my open house this weekend, right? So it was just right there in his real estate business. And, you know, the whole gays and lesbians are murderers thing, I think most people would agree probably crosses the line. Even better, there was a swell fella in Arizona recently. This was just within the past month or so. He was sweeping the sidewalk outside of the building that he lived in a commercial area. He was not acting as a realtor. He was just standing there on the street. Two black men pulled up and started filming a video for their blog. And he approached them and yelled at them and told them that it was a no N-word zone and that they needed to leave. So when these things get to the association, when these things hit the paper, what happens? Well, they hit the news media, and it starts off with local realtor tells two black men to leave because it's a no N-word zone. He's identified as a realtor. He is out there now in the press, essentially as a representative of the organization. So people may look at that and say, oh yeah, when you say that's who we are, you're racists, because that's what we're seeing in the newspaper. Now, I use a couple of examples. NAR got literally a couple of hundred of them in the months of the year, say January to July or so, when we started this process. So you can imagine, if that's what got to NAR, how many of them were coming into different local associations and state associations. It's not a new problem. It was just exacerbated recently. So what happened? First of all, there's a new standard of practice. The Code of Ethics is organized. There's 17 articles, which are the higher level. There's about 90 to 100 standards of practice, which sort of explain what the articles mean. So Article 10 is the anti-discrimination article that's been there for ages. Standard of Practice 10-5, and I'm going to read this to you, says realtors must not use harassing speech, hate speech, epithets, or slurs based on race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, national origin, sexual orientation, or gender identity. That list of what I'll just call protected classes is larger than what the federal law and state law requires. Sexual orientation and gender identity have been added over the years by NAR. That's actually something, again, I can tell you that Pennsylvania's representatives have been in on. That started happening about 10 years ago, the last time I was on Interps, and was overseen in part by some combination of Bill and Dominic through their work on that committee as well. So it's a new standard of practice specifically talking about types of speech. So not just what the article says now, which is that you have to provide equal services or you can't discriminate, but it really zeroes in on this specific kind of speech. Before anybody asks, my go-to in explaining this is to say, before you ask me a question, read the words of the standard of practice. It's not offensive speech. It's not annoying speech. It's not speech that you disagree with. It's harassing speech, hate speech, epithets, or slurs, and it has to be based on one of those criteria. So when somebody says to me, I'm not going to listen to you because lawyers suck, that's not hate speech based on one of those protected classes, because lawyers are not a protected class, right? If somebody has an opinion, or somebody says something that annoys you, that is not harassing speech, hate speech, epithets, or slurs. So to those who are concerned that this is a uber politically correct thing that's trying to shut people down, that is not the case. It's really narrowly focused. And one of the additional changes is that there's a 2 or 3 page appendix to the Code of Ethics and Arbitration Manual, because 250 pages to the manual isn't enough. We have to add them. That gives definitions, like this is the dictionary definition of what harassment is. You probably have a harassment, either a bylaw or a policy with your local association. We do at the state that will explain a little bit about what harassing speech looks like. So it gives these explanations. There's going to be a lot of training for professional standards folks, Cheryl. So this is something that we're going to be working on at the national level, at the state level, and at the local level to make sure that people understand what this covers and what it doesn't. As an example, one of the things that people have started conversations on is, well, they're trying to take away Merry Christmas, right? It's the time of the year where that comes up. Saying Merry Christmas to someone is not hate speech. Following a Muslim person wearing a burqa down the street and screaming Merry Christmas, that's hate speech, right? It's not the words. It's how you use them. It's the intent behind them. So just take a look at the resources before you kind of get too concerned about what this is canceling and what it's not. Because if you're out there using hate speech on a regular basis and you're concerned about your membership, perhaps you should be, questioning whether you're in the right line of work, because using hate speech publicly on a regular basis is probably not good for business. Next thing, there's a jurisdictional rule. It's called policy statement number 29, which previously had said that the code of ethics can only be enforced against you in real estate related activity. That's been expanded now to say all activity. So what does that mean? That means if you post hate speech on your personal Facebook page, that is potentially actionable under this change to the code of ethics, because it doesn't have to be a client that you call a name. It can be in any context. For example, we were seeing lots of people who were, leaving horribly, offensive hate speech comments on something like the local newspaper website, or there were a number of examples of people who might have even had a realtor hat on, who were, watching rioters and saying we should shoot all of them. There was somebody who was actually in, I believe, one of the NAR group listserv things. I don't remember if it was on the Hub or another group, where they said something like, well, if Black people want to roll things back, why don't we roll it back all the way to when there was still slavery? So things that were maybe not in the context of real estate, but clearly crossed that line. Why would NAR have expanded it to say anything that you do or say potentially could be brought under this umbrella? So here's where, for those of you who may have seen the video that I did on this, I use Bill Festa as an example, but I can't see everybody's hands here, but in your own minds, raise your hand. If you spend a lot of money trying to get people to associate your name with your real estate practice, right? I'm guessing everybody's hand is going up, because that is your biggest asset. You want people to see the name Stephanie Biello and think, oh, real estate, because that's how you get business. That's how you do your business. That is your modus operandi. So it's really not true for the most part that realtors have a completely separate private life. This person in Arizona was not acting as a realtor. He did not identify himself as a real estate agent, but it takes about 30 seconds to realize where somebody works anymore, especially if you're licensed by the state. So anything you do is likely to be attached to your realtor identity. And guess what? If you do something so privately that it's not attached to your realtor identity, so maybe the joke you tell around the Thanksgiving Zoom call, if it's not attached to you as being a realtor, there's not going to be a complaint filed anyway, right? If you say something among your family, if they file a complaint, you've got a family issue. It's not an ethics issue. If you say something at in line at the grocery store and people overhear it and think, what a terrible person, if they don't realize that you're a realtor, they by definition aren't going to be filing a complaint with a local association. So just by definition, the fact that a complaint is filed means that they have attached your private existence to your realtor existence. So I do see a question that popped up here in the chat, asking, does it have to be a public Facebook page or doesn't it matter? The answer is anyone, literally anyone, is authorized to file an ethics complaint. So it can be a client, it can be a customer, it can be another agent, it can be a random person who sees or hears something that might cross that line. So it doesn't have to be a public Facebook page, but somebody somewhere has to see it and take action to file the complaint. And they, of course, would need to be able to prove, if it got to the point of a hearing, that the thing was said. So somebody once told me that they think that they saw Stephanie might have posted something somewhere in a private page that said something like this, is probably not going to get very far in the process, because it's going to be hard to prove that the thing was actually typed unless someone can, take a screenshot of it.
Interesting.
All right. So the last point I'm going to make on that is to point out that although people get completely freaked out by this idea that it's going to be expanded to all of your activity, in most cases, the code of ethics itself limits your exposure basically to real estate stuff. So Article 12 says that you have to present a true picture in your real estate advertising or communications. It doesn't say that anything that you ever do has to present a true picture. So if you teach piano lessons on the side and you put an ad in the church bulletin that says Hank Lerner, piano teacher extraordinaire, instructor to 7 symphony piano players, and that's a lie. That is not part of your real estate communications. Therefore, you would not be subject to the Code of Ethics because Article 12 itself says real estate communications and marketing. So there's a little bit of wiggle room in a couple of articles, but really the expansion here was to allow ethics complaints to move forward under this 10-5, Article 10, Standard Practice 10-5. And the expansion is actually not going to apply to most other things in the Code of Ethics to begin with. So there may be a few things here or there that get a little bit wider enforcement, but it's really not going to be much beyond Article 10 and this particular standard of practice.
And these are all effective now.
They were voted
Right.
on, I believe, the 13th of November, and all went into effect immediately. Yes.
Okay.
And
And
again,
Bill just
yeah.
asked that question at the same time. Great minds think alike, Bill.
Yep, absolutely. And to be clear, again, these are things you shouldn't have been doing anyway. So hopefully most people aren't going to have to do much changes in their practice in order to avoid potential sanctions here.
Right. Yeah, so those were very informative. We'll be able to download those new Code of Ethics shortly. Do you think they're up, ready, or?
So all of the explanation, all of the materials like the change language and stuff like that is available through the link. I see Matt put it in there. The videos are going to be done like every 2 to 4 weeks over the next few months. So the one that they did on Monday, if it's not up yet, it will be up shortly to view after the fact. So once they produce it and get it up, if you can't register and see them live, you will be able to see them along the lines. And fair warning to those of you who serve on the local or the state professional standards committee, it is highly likely that we are going to somewhere between require and extraordinarily strongly advise that committee members watch at least a few of them. You don't necessarily have to sit through all 6 hours, but there's a few of them that are going to be super important. And frankly, it's going to be easier to let you all watch that video that's already in there, as opposed to me having to explain it, 4 different times in our training sessions.
Yeah, very cool. All right, so we have the link there. We have that. Is there anything else you want to talk about that before we move on to COVID-19, our favorite subject, about these new any words of wisdoms to our?
Yeah, don't be an ass. I think I may have mentioned that before. And that's really what it comes down to. Like I said, if you are spending time considering whether the thing that you're posting is hate speech or not, just probably don't post it. Have somebody else look at it, take a deep breath. I'm a big fan of the type the email without the name in the to line so that you don't accidentally send it before you've had a chance to think it through. So do the same thing with your social media posts as well.
Very good advice. Okay, so let's talk about COVID-19 and the biggest issue these days is the new COVID restrictions from the governor. So what's going on there, and can we anticipate any more changes?
So that part is easy. You can absolutely anticipate more changes.
Great.
When, where, what, I haven't the faintest idea. But I think it's pretty clear, and I don't necessarily view this as a bad thing. What happened in the spring was oh my God, right? So we've got a new thing that's come out of nowhere. It's raging through different areas of the country. Nobody really quite knows how to address it, what to do. Everybody's caught flat-footed. So the government, in many cases, took the most extreme steps that they could all at once to try to shut things down, to take a breath and figure it out. So I'm not here to discuss, debate, argue over the wisdom of that at the time. That's what happened. So that's where we got massive business shutdowns. Obviously, real estate was not happy with the side of the line that we were on there in terms of life-sustaining or not life-sustaining. But even those that were allowed to stay open were severely decimated by all the restrictions that were in place. So that was a gut punch initial reaction that was really extreme. What's happening now is that Governor Wolf, governors across the country are trying to take a more targeted approach, a sort of a more broad-based, as we need to do more, we will do more kind of approach. So what does that mean specifically for real estate and the restrictions that are in there now? So, and please, before anybody posts any comments, nothing that I'm saying here is endorsing, supporting, taking a position on these restrictions. I'm just explaining it. Governor has said that he and the administration is going to do everything in their power to avoid any additional like broad-based total shutdowns of business. What they're trying to do now is create rules that apply to everybody pretty much the same. And if there's anybody called out, it's specific businesses or industries that have been indicated to be higher risks of spread. So it at the beginning, it was like, you're all shut down, but we're going to give exclusions to certain businesses and allow them to do more. Now that script is kind of flipped, and this is what applies to pretty much everybody. And the ones that are getting exclusions aren't getting less restricted, they're getting more restrictions. So it's everybody has to do this, but if you run a restaurant or bar, ooh, there's like 3 more layers that you have to worry about, right? So, so right now, the orders that are out there apply to almost every business, the whole life-sustaining, not life-sustaining, essential, non-essential, that doesn't matter. That doesn't exist. It's not a framework that the governor is using. We've got rid of the red, yellow, green stuff. So that whole green phase counties, that's out the window as well. Everybody is pretty much being treated the same. So among other things, that has caused us to, that's another reason why we completely rewrote all the FAQs and the business guidance to get rid of those phrases, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page there. So before we talk about some of the specific things, to be crystal clear, one of the things this means for real estate is that the best thing we can do right now is learn the rules and follow the rules as best we can to make sure that we do not end up in the crosshairs of the Department of Health contact tracers. The reason restaurants and bars are there, the reason that gyms are there is because contact tracing is suggesting that these are places that tend to spread the virus more. The reason there's the guidance about trying to shut down family gatherings is because contact tracing is showing that small indoor gatherings are causing the spread. So if real estate agents, realtors, buyers, sellers are not following the rules and they get careless and the contact tracers start finding that property owners, for example, seem to keep picking up coronavirus 3 days after they've had a modified open house at their property, that's where you're going to see something that comes out with real estate on it, but it's not going to give us a break. It's going to say more rules are going to apply to real estate right here. So please do your best to stay within the scope of the rules as best as you can so that we don't pop our head out of the gopher hole and possibly get it shot off. So that was happy, right? So let's talk about a few of the specifics with the orders that came out over the past couple of weeks. And I believe, if I recall correctly, we're up to about 14 orders and advisories that have come out over about the last 2.5 weeks. Many of them don't apply directly to real estate or to the general business stuff, but several do. Masks. 3 words of advice: wear your mask. It's not optional. It's not a political statement. It's not something that your buyer or seller can waive. You need to wear the mask. It's the mask rules have been heightened from what they were before even. There are additional requirements actually for businesses to implement the mask rules. It used to be that if somebody said they had a medical restriction of some sort, you could just say, okay, you don't have to wear the mask. Now the order actually says that you have to provide them alternatives. And if they're still going to refuse to wear the mask, you can refuse them service. So we know that there were some clients, and if I'm honest, some agents as well, who just breezed through every door and said medical, and just refused to wear the mask because they didn't want to. Now those businesses are authorized to tell you that you can't come in if you're not going to wear a mask. So, we'll give you a virtual tour, but we're not letting you in the house, is something that would be acceptable to say, for example, if your seller is uncomfortable with somebody coming in without a mask. So really stop fighting about them. If you still are, wear the masks. The general business rules say that in-person business activity should not occur unless doing it remotely is impossible. Is there a definition of impossible? Of course there's not. Impossible is a thing that you're going to have to use your best judgment on and figure out. So what does that mean? I've got 2 kids at home and 2 dogs and a stressed out wife, and my basement is unheated, and I'd really rather go into the office for a few hours. I'm not talking about myself. So I'm just going to pop into my real estate office and make a bunch of calls there because frankly, I just need the break. That's not impossibility. That's inconvenience, right? You can do all of the work at home. You're just choosing not to. That is not what the order says. The order says impossible. So for example, if you run a brokerage and you get lots of information that is mailed on paper to your office, you have checks coming in, you have to write checks to go out. You need to pay the bills for the office. Somebody needs to keep an eye on the security system, yada, yada, yada. Well, it's impossible to pick up your mail if you are not there physically picking up your mail. So it's okay to have your office open. PAR's office is open for financial and accounting purposes. Our folks do not spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week there, however. They might come in, do some things in the office that they need to do in the office, and then take the rest of it home. So figure out what really needs to happen in an office. I have been to the new GPAR offices. I'm pretty sure that that is not, Matt's office in the building. So, for the most part, you guys already didn't work in offices on a regular basis. So just keep that up. If you're a broker, take serious thought about whether you need the doors open at all. And if so, make sure that it's the absolute minimum necessary to get the business done. Last one, and this is the fun one, I say in a completely masochistic way, is the travel order. So the testing and quarantine order for traveling across state lines. I'm going to take a wild guess and say many of you in your market deal with buyers who cross the line, or you yourself may cross the line going back and forth between Pennsylvania and a neighboring state, whether it's because you live elsewhere or because you do some work elsewhere. The travel order says that if you are traveling across state lines, so if you're coming into Pennsylvania, or if you leave Pennsylvania and come back, you are supposed to be able to produce evidence of a negative COVID test from a sample taken within the past 3 days, or you're supposed to quarantine in place and basically see nobody other than those you're traveling with for 14 days. So what the heck do you do with that in real estate? If you remember the part where I said we need to comply as best as we possibly can and not just ignore it, this is something that is extraordinarily difficult to comply with as written based on how real estate actually works, right? So you've got a buyer in New Jersey who wants to move into Pennsylvania. They don't know when the house of their dreams is going to hit the MLS. So if they wait until a property hits the MLS, then they go looking for a test, and then they have to wait for the results of the test. Odds are pretty good there's already going to be 10 offers on the house, and it's going to be signed, sealed, and delivered before they can even see it. That doesn't make a lot of sense based on how real estate works. I've actually got 2 calls over the past couple of days to the hotline from people in other states saying that they recently had COVID. They're through their quarantines. They're cleared to, get back to being with people and work and all that. But they're saying, I can't get tested. Like if I go somewhere and say, I want a test, they're going to ask me, have you been diagnosed before? I'm going to say, yes, I cleared it in mid-November. They're not going to test me. So how am I supposed to get a test? And how am I supposed to go to somebody's house if I'm supposed to quarantine for 14 days first? So our advice at the moment is do your level best to comply with the rules. Tell your buyers, tell your sellers what the rules are. Use PAR's form HSA, COVID HSA, which is the health screening form. There's a question on there that talks about, have you been to a state with a travel advisory? Right now, all other 49 states have a travel advisory because of this order. Say yes, and do your best to get tested. I can't tell you, and I won't tell you to ignore the order. I can tell you that what I need to say is if they can't get the test, they shouldn't see the property. We are aware that that is not always going to be how your buyers and sellers want to happen. Want it to happen. The best I can say is that you need to strongly advise them to follow the rules. You need to paper everything as much as you can to prove that you told them to follow the rules. And if it turns out they don't follow the rules, I'm honestly not sure what to tell you because we're not quite exactly sure what's going to happen with enforcement. But I can tell you this. If somebody gets sick and they trace it back to Agent X told me not to worry about it, I could just go see the house. That will be a very large liability event and one that your E&O coverage may not actually cover because you were deliberately violating an order that was in place. Now that depressing thought, I'll just end there. We'll move to the next paragraph. PAR is in touch with the Department of Health. We and every other business organization in the state have had tremendous difficulty engaging the administration on a regular basis in any meaningful way. It's not just realtors that are having this trouble, it's everybody. So when we find somebody who says, hey, let me know if you have any questions, I'd be happy to help. We try to milk it for all it's worth. So I've actually got several both emails and voicemails into Department of Health, higher level person of the Department of Health, who offered to help try to work us through some of these things. If we get something out of that, I will absolutely, I will be here in the basement working on changes to the FAQs and get the word out. But for the moment, the order is what the order is. Now, I do see there's some questions. There's some questions there about exemptions. There is an exemption for work. So if you live in New Jersey and you drive to Philadelphia every day and you drive home, that's crossing state lines for work. That's okay. You don't need tests in that situation. There's an exemption for medical care. So if you live in Delaware and you're coming to CHOP to get a procedure for your kid, you don't have to get tested for the governor's order. You might need to be tested to be in the medical office, depending on what happens. But there's a few exceptions that are there in the order. There's also what I call the visiting grandma exemption, which is to say you live in Pennsylvania, you went to New Jersey to visit grandma for the day and you came back. That was actually added. I'm not exaggerating. This was published at about 4:30 last Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Because the person from the Department of Health said, hey, we think this helps you with your border crossing thing. And we had to say it doesn't because you're most concerned about people who live in the other state coming to Pennsylvania, not people in PA who go to the other state first. So there are a few exemptions that you can read in there. I see a question if we're making efforts to acquire COVID testing for realtors and also vaccines. That is... So we're not making an effort, and I think that the reason for that is that it's not going to be possible. The testing scheme is what the testing scheme is. I am unaware of any way to get any sort of an industry-based testing system set up. And I can tell you the vaccine distribution is very tightly controlled by the federal government. They actually just had some votes with a CDC panel earlier this week, laying out the criteria of who gets it first, who gets it second, who gets it third. So there is not going to be any sort of an industry-based vaccine anytime in the near future. So there may come a time when they get to the point where maybe some of your offices have had a blood drive or you've had a flu vaccine clinic or something at your office. Sometime in the future when it becomes more readily available, we may be able to do that. But I would guess that anytime in the near future, that's not going to work on an industry-wide basis, unfortunately.
Okay, so let's talk about open houses and how our members can handle an open house in compliance with these new restrictions. I'm concerned about that.
Yeah, so in our best practices, one of the updated pieces of advice is that we are advising that realtors avoid, so I'll back up. We are more formally advising against holding what we're calling traditional open houses. Honestly, I don't think many of you are doing those anymore anyway. So by traditional open house, I mean, you unlock the door, Random people wander through at their own pace, at their own density. You know, you might have 5 people, you might have 20 people. They lie with the name and the contact information they put down on the sign-in sheet. Not that I ever did that when I went to an open house. They just wander around unchecked and leave, and you never know who was there. So if by chance any of you are running that sort of open house anymore, you need to stop. There's the business issue. You're supposed to not do in-person business unless it's impossible to do it otherwise. So, you know, having a bunch of people there who are looky-loos, who may or may not be interested in wandering through, it's not impossible to do that other ways. You could do virtual tours, you could do virtual showings. There are other ways to get people who are maybe less interested in the property through the house. There are rules about social distancing. It's now being called physical distancing in a lot of the state orders. There's rules about masks. There's rules about capacity in some cases. So, you know, if you're going to do an open house, it probably needs to be something more like a series of showings across an afternoon from people who don't pre-schedule them in advance. They can come, they can sit in their cars, they can go through the house one at a time for short bursts to get in and get out. Maybe you want to spread out those, let a few minutes at least between each of them to make sure that the property can air out a little bit. You may want to have extra fans, extra ventilation. You want to wipe things down. So really, even if you call it an open house, what you really probably need to limit it to is essentially showings. And even then, the showings need to be as minimal as possible. So we've recommended all along, you know, showing number 1 should be something virtual. If the property is really appealing, maybe showing number 2 is you drag the smaller number of people who are seriously interested into the property to see it in person. If you, so basically that's where we are. You know, do it as showings. Honestly, even advertising an open house, using the words open house may give people the wrong idea. So also consider, what are you really advertising? What are you telling people that you're doing at the property? And remember that you as a licensed professional are responsible for enforcement of these orders. So as a business, the mask order says you are responsible for enforcing the mask order. It's not optional. You are responsible for it. You can be sanctioned. You could potentially have an ethics complaint filed against you if you tell people, if the listing agent says everybody needs to wear masks and the buyer agent lets people in without masks. That could be an ethics complaint. It could also be a licensure complaint. We do know that the State Real Estate Commission, the investigators, are tracking down certain complaints that have been filed against agents and brokers. So there is a risk that if you do something that is unsafe, not only is there the potential of a COVID enforcement, but there actually could be a licensure or ethics enforcement as well. It's good that you left the aggressively depressing stuff till the end of the session.
Okay, so I mean, obviously people are still having the open houses. So we highly encourage them maybe just to pause them for a while so we can kind of get this under control. But for the open houses, if they do want to continue to have those, one, they must have the mask. How about tracing? Do they have to document who has been in and out with the name and phone number and address?
Yeah, one of the upgrades in the recent business order is it says that a business must be able to identify people who are close contacts with a positive test that occurs from somebody who's at the business. So it doesn't say exactly how or who has to do it in what way, but you have to be able to do it. So there are some listing agents who want to know the name and contact number for everybody who's in the property. I realize that's not the norm on how real estate business usually happens. I'm going to say that is not unreasonable. If there is an exposure in the house, you know, the point of more people be testing positive in general is that it is more likely that you are going to have somebody in a property at some point who ends up testing positive. So it's reasonable for a listing agent to say to the buyer agent, you better be keeping this information, because if it turns out that we need to know the names and identities of your buyers, I'm going to be calling you to get it. It's also not unreasonable, however, for the listing agent to say, you know what, I want the information. I don't want to rely on you probably keeping enough information to me to have me help with contact tracing. I want to have that information myself. So it's ultimately up to the buyer to decide if they want to give that information to the seller. But the seller could say, if you're not going to tell me who you are, I don't want you in my property. I will point out again, that's part of the reason that we have the PAR COVID forms. The COVID HSA would identify the person who is making the statements. I have not tested positive, I'm healthy, et cetera, et cetera. And part of the reason for those forms is to be able to help and do that contact tracing. I will also throw in a plug on behalf of the Pennsylvania Department of Health. I know most of you guys answer your phones no matter what, because you can never be sure that the person on the other end isn't an actual or potential client. So you end up picking up a lot of spam calls just to make sure. We actually get that a lot on the hotline. For those of you who do call the legal hotline, put our phone number in your phone, because I can tell when I'm getting I'm not talking to you because I think you're a spam call answer. Getting back to COVID, one of the things the state is saying is that they're having difficulty sometimes doing contact tracing because people are refusing to pick up the phone, or they're not answering when somebody leaves a voicemail that says I'm from the state. So if you do get a call from the State Department of Health or from a county or city health official saying there's been a positive case, we need more information for contact tracing, for heaven's sake, answer the call, return the call, provide any information that you can. Again, if it becomes clear that there's a group of realtors who are resisting the state and not helping with contact tracing, that's the sort of thing that could put a bullseye on the back of the entire industry.
Yeah, we don't want that. No, we don't want to go through that again. Well, we are at the top of the hour, and Hank, thank you so much. I just want to acknowledge Bill Festa, President Bill, PAR's president. I think he wanted to make a comment there. Go ahead,
Oh,
Bill.
well, thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, I'm going to tell you something about Hank that most people don't know. PAR staff, I mean, we all got hit over the head with this, and PAR staff has gone into a high level of action, and they're all great people. But if we had to pick the MVP of this whole crisis that we've gone through, I will tell you that Hank has been a rock star. What he's not telling you is that, yes, he's working from home, but that means he's working day, night, weekends, probably holidays. He's constantly updating the COVID page, and not only on an occasional basis, sometimes hour by hour. He's preparing scripts for the videos. He's doing meetings like this. And you would think that if somebody is working from home, they would get to see their family. He is literally working in his basement and sacrificing time from his wife and those two beautiful children. So Hank, keep up the good work, and we're all very proud of what you're doing. I
deeply appreciate that, Bill. I do want to point out, since you mentioned preparing scripts for presentations, I did not prepare that script. That was purely on Bill. However, I did have my year-end review with Mike yesterday, so if you wouldn't mind forwarding that to him before he finalizes, the bonus and salary information, I would greatly appreciate it.
No,
So you know, we've recorded this, Hank. So we will we'll FedEx this, or whatever it takes to get it to Mike.
I appreciate that. Just make sure it goes to the house, not to the office.
There you go. Well, Hank, you have done an awesome job, and you've always been a great resource for GPAR and for all PAR members. And I just want to thank you for taking the time this morning to join us for coffee and go over a couple of these new changes. Hopefully, they won't be for very long.
We can hope.
Yeah, so thank you, Hank. And Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. Yes, I just want to give a little bit more Hank love. Hank thanks so much for everything that you do for us locally. You know, we send you emails, and sometimes you're in the thick of it, and you'll let us know you're in the thick of it, but then we get a response that is thoughtful, explains a lot of different stuff. Sometimes it gets a little bit too lawyery, but that's your role, that's your job, that's what you're supposed to do. And we appreciate you always trying to help us out to be better for our members and for our association, because usually when reaching out to you, it's kind of we're in a spot and we need some direction, we need some guidance. And the way that you do it with a high level professionalism, as well as your personal touch with your funny sense of humor, it's very, very, very much appreciated. So, you know, we've had some tough times over this last year, and the splash humor in helps out a tremendous amount. So appreciate that on so many of those different levels. So thank you, Hank. Guys, got the weekend, enjoy the weekend. Don't forget the 5K, sign up for the 5K. We would love to see you in one of those awesome t-shirts. And with that, everybody have a great weekend. Keep your eyes out. We're going to be having our general membership meeting 2 weeks from today. So that will be coming out with some messaging. We would love to see a packed house for that. And with that, have a great weekend, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.